Hi, Dr. Alex here, and welcome to one of my more sporadic and occasional videos on music equipment. So this one, as the title I'm sure has already told you, is how to convert a faulty Vox Cambridge 30 twin reverb to a Vox AC-30, a much more desirable amplifier. If you haven't already guessed, this is not an entirely serious video in that it hasn't really magically morphed. You hopefully can see it behind me here with the cat in the way. Hasn't magically morphed into an actual AC-30. It is still a Vox Cambridge 30, at least its cases anyway, and its speakers are, but the rest of it is very much not. But also it's not full of valves either. You can't really say this is now an AC-30 in the classic AC-30 sense. So it does sound like an AC-30 to me, and it's really good compared to how it was. But this isn't entirely an AC-30 either. It's neither a Vox Cambridge 30 anymore, nor an AC-30. And in fact, because of what I've done to it, it actually turns out to be possibly two not quite a Vox AC-30s in one amp. You might think of it as a Vox AC-60 now, because of the magic of what I've done to it. Anyway, without further ado, I will probably be ducking back and forth to my notes, but I'm definitely not going to be reading them because I want to be more natural when I'm doing these videos and not reading like I'm reading off a clipboard, which was a very tempting thing to do. Anyway, here comes my first cut, I think. Cat. So the first thing you might wonder is, why would I convert a Vox Cambridge 30 into an AC-30? Well, this Vox Cambridge 30 has been nothing but trouble since I first got it. It had the infamous Cambridgeitis, where the let's get this right, the opto resistor. The variable resistor that's based upon light, opto resistor, whatever it's called, was faulty, which is a common Cambridge 30 fault. I got it replaced with a new LDR. It's a light-dependent resistor, basically. But in the process, it seemed to pick up a hiss from somewhere. I also did something else to it. I forget what it was. It's so long ago. But I managed to muck it up in such a way that I could not eradicate the hiss. More than that, it went to an actual repair shop with people who know what they're doing twice. Both times it came back with the hiss in place. This last time I basically had given up on it and thought, I'm going to throw this thing away. Well, not throw it away, but maybe just use it as a speaker cabinet for something else. But in the end, I figured out, or an inspired idea came to me on how to turn it into something far more like an AC-30, which is what I really wanted all along, to be fair. For anyone who hasn't guessed, I'm very much a Ritchie Blackmore fan, particularly in his Deep Purple years, and particularly in the classic awesome Deep Purple years of 69 through to 73. You know, that is my ideal Ritchie Blackmore sound, and he is very much into his AC-30s, even though sometimes he hid the AC-30s apparently inside the cases of Marshalls to make himself look more rock god, but in his heart of hearts he just wanted the chimey, crystal clear sound of an AC-30, so he stuffed the innards inside Marshalls to hide them. But anyway, that's what I've heard anyway. That's what he said in certain interviews anyway. So yeah, there's a reason why I was going for a certain sound, and I wanted an AC-30. I wanted something like it, and now it's much more like an AC-30. In fact, it's, to my crude ears, indistinguishable from an AC-30, or two AC-30s, as you'll find out. So that's why I needed to replace it, or repair it, or upgrade it, or make it something different, because it essentially wasn't working properly. The idea of how to do that came through other things I've been doing, and you will have seen, if you've seen some of my other weird music videos, you'll have noticed where I probably got the idea for this. Inside the Cambridge that was, there is now a Vox AC-30 amp plug. The mini jack, I'll flash up some images on screen to go with this, the mini jack amplifier that you just plug into the guitar and plug headphones in normally. I was amazed the first time I used it. The sound from it is so much like an AC-30, what you'd expect to hear if you were playing a huge, well, an AC-30 through a large set of speakers, that I thought, this is just the best sound. I wish I could use this more. As you've seen in my previous videos, if you watched them, I then started putting the AC-30's headphones output directly into a 12-inch Celestion speaker in a little portable cabinet that I made, and it was more than powerful enough to drive one or two of those speakers directly and have something that you could use as a practice amp in your flat, home, shed, wherever you like, and not risk disturbing the neighbours, but simultaneously get really quite a decent output out of it. Just right for playing quietly, but sounding good and like a full-sized amp quite a bit, in fact. That was one of the steps that took me on the path to where we are now. The other thing I've been doing with it more recently, was I took the amp plug and took its output and plugged it into the return on the effects loop on that Marlin Reverb 50 over there. Obviously, that's a 50-watt amplifier. Its power amp stage is bigger than the one in the AC-30, or should say the Cambridge 30 as was, and what's actually in here. I'll come back to that in a minute. So that, when you plug the amp plug into the power amp section of the Reverb 50, it's deafening. This one, my ears are still slightly ringing from having practiced before starting the video, is pretty damn loud. Not quite as loud as the 50-watt. It is only 30 even in this, at least in its current setup. I will show you some other setups where it isn't quite that anymore, not as limited as 30 watts. But by driving the power amp section of that amp with the amp plug and realizing there was a potential for a full amplifier born out of just the amp plug, the tiny little battery-powered amp plug, that's what gave me the idea of how to resurrect the Cambridge 30 and make it something far more awesome. So you can probably guess what I did. I took the innards of the Cambridge 30. I initially tried to see if I could alter the PCB and just get a line into the power amp section only. The PCB on the original Cambridge is not a pretty or friendly circuit board to work on, and although I found the power amp eventually, I couldn't get a decent splice in, so I could just use the power amp as was and have nothing else there. In fact, it was just not pleasant to work with. I realized while messing with the Cambridge's power amp section that it's just a chip. It's just an integrated circuit on one tiny chip. And realizing that, I thought there was not much left of the Cambridge worth salvaging here. By the way, one thing you might want to keep, which I didn't, because for reasons I'll get into in a minute, is the heatsink. It's got quite a nice heatsink on the Cambridge 30's PCB. Beyond that, it's got just a bog standard integrated circuit chip power amp section. So nothing special was my reasoning, and rightly so. I went looking online and found all sorts of awesome things. So my first step was to take the entire innards, even the controls, everything, it's gone. I'll show you some pictures close up so you can see what's going on, and threw it in the bin. By the way, throwing that in the bin, replacing it, there is the amp plug 2 in here, plus a power amp section, which I got off eBay, and I'll talk about that in a minute. This is so much lighter. This is so easy to pick up. It is ridiculous compared to how much it weighed before. You would have thought that most of the weight of this comes off the two 10-inch Celestion speakers, because they're metal-backed, heavy things. But no, a significant portion of the weight in the Cambridge comes out of its metal chassised gubbins. And once I'd thrown its metal chassis gubbins away, this is now really light to haul around in comparison to how it was before. Not unpleasant to get up and downstairs at all, unlike its original configuration. Anyway, so as I've already hinted, I chucked away this in its entirely. I bought a power amp section because I figured if these chip-based power amps must be 10 a penny. They must be available to buy on the internet. I'm sure I could use it myself. Went looking, and immediately these power amp sections are 10 a penny on the internet already on a nice, easily accessible PCB. Sometimes, in the case of the one I bought, with heatsinks already attached. Now, I think I paid £14, that's £14 for one off eBay. You can get them cheaper. I think I was as low as £8, cheapy from China. They didn't have the heatsink attached, but then I could have kept the heatsink from the original PCB if I was that fussed. But they also didn't have quite as nicely laid out or labelled attachments as this one that I bought. So for ease of use, also the bonus of coming with its own heatsink already attached, I splashed out a whole £14 on this power amp section, 30 watts. I was going for 30 because I wanted an AC-30 type setup, so a 30 amp power section was perfect. Now these power amps are actually designed for use with the boy racers driving up and down in their Honda Civics, blasting out their speakers. They're for use in car audio systems. So one downside potential of this is that they run off DC, whereas obviously any power source you want to use as a gigging person with an amplifier is an AC power supply. You want to plug it into the mains. So there were some issues with that. I was aware as soon as I got it, this could be a problem. And I have been playing with some smoothing capacitors for reasons, but it turns out perhaps I didn't need to. But I have added some smoothing capacitors into its circuit. So remember that these power amp things you find on the internet, they are used on cars, which is DC. They don't necessarily have the smoothing capacitors necessary to get rid of that mains hum. But on the other hand, I'm not sure that that was actually a problem, as it turns out. But I have added in some smoothing capacitors. Come back to that in a minute. The other aspect that I have altered is that the amp plug runs off batteries as well. You can buy battery to mains adapters, again, in my case off eBay, I think for about £10-11 for one of these power supplies, that you plug these two things that slot into the battery slots, and it becomes an AC power supply. Again, worrying about 60 Hz hum, I've actually put smoothing capacitors into the circuit for that too, although perhaps it wasn't necessary. We'll find out. Also, both of those stages are running off a single gang, a 2-socket output from one mains plug, because you want any mains powered thing in the amplifier circuit to be running off the same source, ideally. So again, reduce, if not reduce the hum entirely, at least have the hums in sync, and so that they're not interfering more than they would do with the sound. As it is, there's almost zero hum on this thing now. The little hum there is probably due to the guitar I'm using having a very slight problem with its earthing. So if you touch the guitar, the hum's eliminated. You let go of the guitar, there's a bit more hum, but it's minimal. And with the loudness you can get out of this thing, it's absolutely trivial. If you were playing live with it, you would not notice, you would not care. I might try and fix it a bit more. I'd probably have a look at the guitar, but I'm pretty sure this doesn't require any more smoothing capacitors. Anyway, I've yammered on enough about the basics of what I did, so I chucked out the innards. I put in a new power amp section. I'll do some close-ups on this, pictures rather, so you can see what I did. But yeah, on the wooden back of this, there is screwed into place a power amp section from someone's car audio, 30 quid. It's got its own volume control as well. So whereas when I plugged into the Reverb 50, I couldn't control the master volume on that because it was just bypassed entirely, and the only volume control came from the amp plug itself. On this, there's actually a volume control on the power amp section, so I can control that and control the volume via the amp plug too. However, I actually have the volume on the power amp turned right up to maximum, kind of like the configuration when I was using the Reverb 50, because even when you've got it on the lowest volume possible to make it even audible, it somehow gives it more guts. If I've got it on you can actually, I should have said that to begin with. This can be run so low a volume it's acceptable to play in the flat. So this can now also be my flat practice amp and my gigging amp in a small stadium. More or less, if you rig it up to the stadium system. Anyway, the point is, I use it with the power amp stage turned to maximum because even on the low volume settings, there's a bit more guts to the sound. You can feel the power that's not being utilized, if you like. The bass comes through with a bit more of a kick, even at a very low volume. There's just a little bit more. You get the. It's more of the sound of a large amplifier when you've got the power amp section turned right up to top and control the volume using the volume on the preamp stage, which is basically the AC-30 amp plug itself. So I've probably covered most of what I needed to yammer about in terms of how I gutted this and made it into an AC-30. There's a couple of things I should talk about. The smoothing capacitors may not have been necessary, but I initially used some 4,000, let's get this right, 4,000 microfarad capacitors, two of them, one on each section. So one on the power amp and one on the power going into the amp plug 2. This I thought wasn't enough because I was still getting hum out of it. So I then didn't replace them, augmented them, a couple of 22,000 microfarad ones. So that means that we've now got 26,000 microfarads worth of capacitance on both stages. This is when I got suspicious because I was still getting the same level of hum. Only, in fact, once I turned on the amp plug itself, then I was getting loads of mains hum, and I thought there's no way with that amount of smoothing capacity on it it would have not got rid of the hum. I realized it was the crappy connector I was using between the jack output on the amp plug 2 and the guitar lead that actually caused, somehow it's picking up 60 Hz hum like a radio antenna. Once I chucked that out of the mix and used a more standard connection, suddenly all the 60 Hz hum, barring the tiny bit of earthing hum that we've got with the guitar, gone. And I was like, I wasted so much time, which is why I'm saying you might not need that full 26,000 microfarads, or 26 millifarads, I suppose that would be, of capacitance to damp out the 60 hertz hum. Maybe I've been overly cautious. Maybe that problem with the jack connection made me do too much. Maybe this is now belt and braces set up here. It's just over-engineered. However, there's no harm in putting smoothing capacitors into your main supply circuits. This is I haven't wasted time in that respect. This will always have a really nice smooth power input current on both stages, both the preamp, the amp plug 2, and on the power amp stage, which, bear in mind, comes from some boy racer's car setup, essentially is what it's for. That leads me on to one final thing that I should have mentioned. I'll talk about the setup of the volumes and stuff in a minute. The tones, etc., that I want to get out. But this, I've said, is like two AC-30s. Because it comes from a stereo system for a car, it's actually two 30-watt power amp stages, one for each channel, left and right. I don't want a stereo guitar amp. I want an amp that just plays from the guitar and comes out the speakers. I like a very basic setup. I also like very few effects. I'll come back to that in a minute as well. So each channel has 30 watts on it. So one of the 30-watt channels is running the two speakers in the actual cabinet itself. The other 30-watt output is going to one of the few things I did properly, which was a new 1/4-inch socket on the back, which the external speaker cabinet I've got will plug into. And unlike often happens when you plug an external speaker cabinet in, it doesn't cut the power to the main speakers inside this. They will both run simultaneously, unless as I'll show you when I'm doing this, unless I disconnect the speakers from the main cabinet, you get both of them. So if you get both of them out, you will end up with 30 watts on the speaker cabinets, 30 watts on the external speaker cabinets. That makes, I think you can do the math, 60 watts. So this has now become a 60-watt AC-30, or two AC-30s, or if such a thing ever existed, an AC-60. The point is, for chump change power amp off eBay, I got two AC-30 outputs, essentially. So the amp plug drives the input, obviously, and there's two identical outputs, one for each channel on the original power amp stage, coming out through both of the outputs. I will run it with the internal speakers. I'll run it with the external Twin 12, because that is actually closer to your perhaps classic AC-30 setup, where you're running an AC-30 with a Twin 12 cabinet, usually integrated, but you can have the separate heads and separate cabinets, but that's more traditional. And there is a difference in sound between the Twin 10s and the Twin 12s, and I'll talk about that when I get to it. It doesn't sound quite the same. To preference, you might prefer one or another. I'll talk about my preferences in a second when I get to them. Finally, I'll run them both together. And in fact, spoilers, I think I like it best when it's running both together, both the 10 and the 12s together as a 60-watt setup. It's got a really nice sound. The slight dynamic difference between the 10s and the 12s really balance each other out really well. So I will talk about that when I get there. But right now I'm going to have another cut because I need to start getting the guitar on so I can start talking about the actual setup itself to make it my perfect sound for me, which is as close as damn it as I can get to Richie Blackmore's guitar setup sound, because that's all I really ever wanted to sound like. Right, bear with me 1 second. Snap. All right, hello, I'm back again. Oh my God, that's loud. Right. I'm not loud. I should say that I'm loud rather than the amp is loud. So you might just hear some hum in the background. There is some 40 hertz hum. Let me just let go of that. So if I let go, this is the earthing problem. So there's a slight earthing problem with the guitar. Nowhere near as bad as you might think. Touch it, it almost disappears entirely, which is very cool. I'm not that bothered. If I was using this, well, hang on, I am using this. If I was using it to gig with, you wouldn't hear the hum. If I was using it to record with, as I probably will now, I can filter that hum out very easily because it's such low level. I can get rid of it in 1 or 2 passes max. So this does not concern me anymore. It's not like it was before I fixed the hum problem that I had before. It was annoyingly loud and it was difficult to remove. This is perfectly fine. And plus, anyone's heard any old classic amplifiers from the late 60s and 70s, they have a little bit of hum because they've got age. So this has got that aged AC-30 sound to it, straight out of the box. So what more could you want? Anyway, I will now try and demonstrate everything, but I thought I'd talk about the guitar setup and also the amp setup before I start really playing through it. At the moment, it's set up, by the way, for very low level. This is acceptable in your flat/home for the neighbour's level of volume it's on at the moment. And the amp itself, I have to quickly dive behind and have a look, see. Oh, God, it's hard to see. Yeah, the amp is currently set on volume 3 out of 10. That's its main volume. The tone control is set to dead middle, 5. I'll talk about that in a second as to why. It's bang in the middle on the tone control. Because there is no mid, treble, and bass on this. There's just a tone control. So the only control you have is that one thing. And there's a reason why I've set it bang at noon, if you like, 5 o'clock, middle of the range, for a reason. I'll tell you in a second. The last one is the gain. Now, the gain, I don't have... The gain on this is acting more like the preamp if it was an amplifier on its own. So it's like the independent volume knob you get on most amplifiers. We have volume, bass, middle, treble, and then you have a master volume as well. That's how many guitar amps are set up. And you may also have a gain as well. What's mine got? What has mine got? It says, looking over there. What have I got? Oh, right, yeah. So on the Marlin, for example, I proved myself correct. It's got a volume control. It's got overdrive, which is kind of like really what you'd think of as a gain. It's got master volume, then it's got treble, middle, bass, which is what you would expect, and it's got reverb and other things on it too. This hasn't got that initial volume one. Its gain, you'd think, is like the overdrive there, but actually the gain on this thing behaves more like the initial volume control on a standard amp. So that's how I've got it. I'm using it, and I have it set not quite to full. I've got the gain, I think, currently set to 6 or 7 out of 10. Because I'm using it not as a mega distortion, I'm using it as setting the preamp level, if you like. That said, the main volume on that is what really controls the volume of the output, because remember, we're setting the power amp section, this 30-watt power amp, to its maximum. So all volume control now comes out of the preamp stage, the amp plug itself. I'll be wittering about some of the setup there. Guitar. So the guitar, you don't need to worry about the setup too much, really. The tone controls, a la Richie Blackmore, are set to the maximum. The cat has just come to say hello outside the shed. He'll disappear shortly when he hears the music, or whatever passes for music. The tone controls are set to max, because that's how Blackmore plays it. The volume/tone of his playing is generally set only through its volume control, and, of course, the pickup selector. Blackmore tends to throw away the middle pickup. Oh, somebody's stolen my middle pickup. So I only use the front and back pickups, and this selector switch has been swapped out for a 3-way, and the middle one actually selects front and back pickups. So it's actually really nice. This is my main guitar, and it's also my first guitar. It's had many mods done over the years, and this is still my baby. This is the one I love to play with the most. Anyway, the point is that the tone setup on this is entirely controlled through pickup selector and the volume control. Blackmore claims to either use full volume or half volume, depending on whether he wants to do a quiet solo or a loud solo, or I imagine loud playing. I tend to use something similar to that. I tend to use not maximum, but 7 or 8 as my high-level output, and then I tend to put it down to like 3, 4, maybe 2, somewhere between 2 and 4 for the low-level stuff. At the moment, it's actually set on the low-level stuff, so we'll see how that sounds when I start. I think I've talked all I can about the setup in terms of tone. So, oh, by the way, the strings on this, you might be able to see, maybe not, particularly on the lighter strings, they're getting a bit black. These are in need of change. So if it's a little bit dull, I apologize. It passes for now, but I could really do with just changing the strings on this because I've been lazy and not done it. I'll also have to use the one microphone and swap between the two, so you'll see me flipping the mic down to next to the amp and then back up again as I play with it. But anyway, first of all, let's give a quick demo of it on the back pickup, on low volume. So this is low level volume on the guitar and low level on the entire setup over here. In other words, I've got the volume down to 3. It couldn't get much quieter. This is how I would play it if I was in the flat, not wanting to wake up the neighbours. don't know how obvious it is, but there's still a little bit of kick, even at this tiny volume. With a low volume on the guitar, there's a tiny bit of kick from those speakers at the bass level because of the power amp being set right up. So anyway, you get an idea of what it's like on low volume on the guitar, low volume on the preamp, and let's try turning it up to high volume on the guitar. It's still going to be low volume on the amplifier, something you could use in your flat or your house and not wake up the neighborhood. So much swapping between the amplifier and me with the mic. Yeah, just should have said. So I'm putting the volume up to about 7.5 on the guitar. This is the sort of heavier, smoke on the water level of volume that you tend to use. Again, you can still play it quite subtly and quietly if you need to, even with the high volume setting on the guitar. Let's put this down and have a listen. Well, I guess that's mostly what you could I could hope to demonstrate on the low volume, except I guess I did miss out the entire front pickup. So a tiny bit of demoing on the front pickup then. I'll put the volume back down to low on here and then move it up to high for the second half of it. So we're on 3 now and we'll be on 7.5 for the second bit. Okay, so that was all at normal volume. The front pickup just now, rear pickup before, bit I've probably had to cut out because I mucked it up. Yeah, but there you go. So that's all at normal volume. Let's put the volume up to something that would be acceptable out here in the garden, but definitely not in the flat. Okay, so I'm putting the amp plugs volume up to 5, so that's the middle. Nothing else has changed. I'm running this on the low volume on the guitar, so 3 on the guitar, then I'll move up to 7 for the second half. I'll probably just use the rear pickup because I've used a lot of time up on this already. So let's just concentrate on one pickup at a time and go for the volumes instead. So I'll play a little bit on volume 5, low volume on here, and then high volume on the guitar. Although you can probably hear some hum when I turn the guitar off and stop playing, it's minimal. I might try and deal with that at some point in the future. I suspect it's mostly from the guitar's earth circuit. Something I haven't mentioned is that I use very few effects. My ears are starting to ring already, and I'm only halfway up the volume thing. I use very few effects, but what this does have is reverb, which is one of the reasons. Another reason I want to do this. The amp I was using, the MV50, has no effects loop circuit. You can stick the things in easily between the preamp and amp phase, and
there's no reverb on it. So this is going to replace the rather more expensive Vox MV50 I have been using, but I'll probably sell that off to pay for all the stuff I've been doing. Now, so we're halfway up on the volume. It's very loud, obviously. The only effect I've got turned on that is reverb, and on the lowest level as well. So it's lowest level reverb. So you just hear it running on. But yeah, that's kind of all I ever want with an effect. It's just a bit of air under it with a tiny bit of reverb, and then every other change to the sound comes from the guitar, the volume control, and the way you play it. And that's why I want such a simple setup. So let's try it one final time on the highest volume for 2 or 3 notes, and then I'm going to try a couple of other setups with you. Again, not for too long, because this has gone on way too long already. So let's try it in the ear-shattering maximum volume. I'm not going to play it for long. I'll probably just jump straight to high volume on here, volume 7, and highest volume on there. God, that's already... I haven't turned it up yet. All right, here we go. Volume 10. Everything up to 11. Just me scratching the string.
So that's really loud. And this is only a 30 watt amp as opposed to the 50. So the 50 was louder when I was running the amp plug through it, but that's pretty damn loud. Okay, now I'm going to bring in the Twin 12. So I might do another cut at this point, just so I'm not filming me running stuff around the shed. So there'll be another cut. I'm going to bring out the 12 and stack the AC-30 on top of the Twin 12, and we'll try it with the Twin 12 alone, and then we'll try it with both combined at different volume levels, but not for very long. Okay, bear with me 1 second. Something else I forgot to mention previously is that I've got the tone on this set to 5 to try and mimic Blackmore's sound as best as possible. Now, Blackmore tends to boost the mid, which is what I'm trying to do, but there is no bass and treble on this, so putting the mid in the middle is about as close as I can get. Blackmore brings down his treble quite far and his bass way down as well, but his AC-30 is a top boost, which essentially is a treble boost, so his probably does sound a bit more trebly than a standard AC-30 would anyway. So this probably, by putting it to 5 dead center, is like boosting the mids, because it's not boosting the treble and the bass. The lack of it being a top boost probably brings the treble more in line with the bass variation anyway. So how I have it set up is how I get a good sound similar to Blackmore's AC-30 out of the Twin 10 on the Cambridge 30. Now, obviously, it's not a Twin 12. I've now got it plugged into the Twin 12. I've disconnected the speaker cable from the Twin 10 in the actual Cambridge cabinet, so it's only the Twin 12 right now. Now, something that's immediately obvious, I've put the volume right down. I might turn it up in a minute. I will turn it up in a minute. Something that's immediately obvious, it's not as trebly, which is no surprise. I mean, the 12s are bigger, the bass is stronger in the big 12 cabinet. I actually kind of prefer the Twin 10 sound in a way, but something I'm going to try for the first time is changing the tone a little on the amp plug to see if I can get a slightly more trebly output on the Twin 12. But I'll play it at first as it's set up originally on the AC-30 amp plug with the Cambridge 30's speakers, so you can hear just how much less trebly, duller if you like, it sounds through the Twin 12 without altering it. Oh, and now you know why I've got the thing set to 5, to try and get as close as possible to a mid-boosted sound. Actually, let's turn it up a bit just for this sort of tone comparison we're going to do. Okay, if I were using the 12s on their own, I might change the tone setting away from what I was using on the 10s on their own. So the tone is now currently set to, I'll have a quick dive behind and check. That's harder to check than it initially appears. Anyway, the tone is now 6 instead of 5. So by setting the tone to 6 on the twin 12s, I get something closer to the sound I like. I'm having to up the treble slightly if I'm using the twin 12 to make it closer to the Blackmore sound I'm after. I'll just turn the volume up now to the stupid level on the twin 12 so we can hear what that's like. Okay, that was loud. Yeah, okay, so if you put the volume up to maximum on the twin 12, it's comparable to the 50 watt on the maximum. I mean, it's not quite as loud because it's still only a 30 watt, but dear God, that was loud. Okay, let's try both speakers together at a low volume and work our way up. I'm keeping this, by the way, on the volume 7/8 on the back pickup, so it's kind of smoke on the water, space trucking level of volume. But yeah, okay, that was loud. Now let's try both speakers together. I'm probably going to put the tone back down to 5 because I think you'll find, as I've already discovered, when they play together, they kind of augment each other and make themselves sound even more awesome. before I start. So it's now, I've set the volume up a little bit higher than I was probably practicing before. So between 3 and 4 is what it's on at the moment, not 5, because that was already quite loud. But you can, when I play it, you'll be able to hear the tone is now back at the midpoint 5. We've got the twin 10 and the twin 12 together. This is probably the sound I like the best out of it, although I'm perfectly happy to play it with just the 10s up in the flat. Anyway, let's see how it sounds for you. Low level volume, and then we'll whack it up to maximum just briefly. Yeah, this sound I like the best. Both of them together, the 10s and the 12s, playing as a stack. Yeah, that sounds good. Shall we try it with the stupid volume? No more of that before I get arrested. Yeah, that's loud. That's very loud. Oh my god, my ears are blown. I don't know what that's going to play back like on the actual recording. I could see it maxed out on the meter over there. Anyway, there you go. So how to make your Cambridge 30 into an AC-30, or in this case, 2 AC-30s, one on top of the other if you like, all in the same cabinet really. So yeah, I hope this is useful. I, at this point, issue a warning. Do this at your own risk. I can't be responsible if you electrocute yourself, set your amp on fire, set your house on fire, set your hair on fire. Whatever you do that involves fire, it's not my fault, because this is just me playing around with something. I'm not suggesting that it would be safe for anyone else to do this. However, if you're stupid or mad enough to do it, you've seen how I did it. I used a cheapy power amp off eBay for chump change, 14 quid. I used a Vox AC-30 amp plug 2, which again you can get for under £30 in the UK if you're lucky, which is also virtually nothing, as an amazing preamp stage. And yeah, does the job. This is, as far as I'm concerned, my working AC-30 that I can now work with. I will need to do a little bit of fine-tuning to get rid of the final bits of hum, but again, it's irrelevant compared with the actual volume levels coming out. So yeah, I'm happy so far. Any suggestions as to how to get rid of it? I think it's, yeah, earth hum by the look of it in the actual guitar. Any suggestions how to get rid of the final bits of hum, that'll be always welcome. And yeah, leave your comments and suggestions in the comments. That would be a sensible place to do it. Anyway, hope this is useful. I hope this has enabled millions to go out there and make cheap AC-30s for next to nothing compared to the stupid amounts of money it costs. Well, not stupid, but significant amounts of money it costs to get an AC-30 proper. And yeah, one final thing. Yeah, the Cambridge did have a single tube in it. Given the way this thing sounds, I'm not mourning the loss of that tube. I can live with an entirely digital amp if it can give sounds that are that close to an AC-30. That makes no difference. Anyway, that is the end of this video. I will have to cut it all together now out of the various bits we've got. And I hope I remember to say everything I needed to. But for now, until the next video, everyone out there who's listening and watching, take care.